Hi, Gary Chillingworth here for Airgun World, Shooting and Country TV. Welcome to Life at a Range. So, what are we doing today? Well, today we are looking at the difference between training and practice. Now, a lot of you go out there and you shoot on a regular basis, and my good friend Alex, the only time he ever really shoots is when he goes to a competition, and he's a very, very good shot. But there is a huge difference between training in HFT and practice in HFT. So today we're going to look at quite a few techniques that will help build your core level of shooting so that when you actually go to an event, you can use that and you can practice what you've learnt. Without training and without writing down what you are doing, you are never really going to massively improve. An important part of your training is the ability to just get down and shoot and be accurate straight away. Now, the most important thing when you're shooting an HFT, because you can't adjust your gun, is head position, and that's because of parallax error. Now, we've spoken about parallax error before, and essentially when you look through a scope, if your parallax is set at 30 and you look at a target at 30 yards and you move your head about, the crosshairs won't move. But if you set it at 40, you can get a mil dot of movement. That's exactly how much I get at 40 yards. And at 20 yards, I also get around about 0.8 a degree of parallax error. So what we're going to do is we're going to set a target out at 20 yards. I know what my aim point is. And the first thing we're going to try and do is punch 3 holes and hit 3 dots. And that's proving that I'm putting my head in the same position every time I shoot. This could go very, very wrong. So I'll bob my head up and down a little bit and just make sure that I'm absolutely centralised. Check my aim point, half a dot up, and we're going on the left hand side. Well, that's not bad for a first shot with a cold gun straight out the bag. Also proves that I don't really need to fire any off, at least in these conditions. Let's just do another one just to the right. Again, very happy with that. So every time you want to shoot, head off the gun, load, get down and think about where you're placing your head. But that isn't the only thing you need to practice. Shooting off the left side of the peg with the butt rested on the ground is not the only shot you're ever going to do. Sometimes you need to come up the peg. So this needs to be practiced as well. And as you can see, I've pulled that left. And that's because when I come up the peg, my head is in a different position. So let's see if we can repeat that on the next kill zone. This is usually when the pellet goes absolutely straight. Just as we improved at that point. I'll be honest with you, at 20 yards for me, it doesn't always go that much left. So let's try the next line down and see how that goes. But as you can see, up the peg, I'm not as accurate as I am off the deck. What other shots might you have to do from the peg? Well, sometimes the advantage might be coming off the left hand side of the peg. So you're just gripping with your thumb, you're still up the peg, remember to take the safety catch off. And again, we've pulled it low because we're up the peg. I'm now getting data. I'm now knowing that when I'm coming up the peg on some targets, I'm hitting a bit low. Now, is that down to the mechanics of the gun, or is that down to me just not being that good a shot up the peg? Again, low. We're getting more and more data. So if we're getting consistent data off the deck and it's going through the hole every time, and then when we're coming up the peg, we're hitting low and it's repeatable and it's the same thing over and over again, that's data we can use. The other thing you might need to use is a spider hand coming slightly off the peg. Again, another shot that we can practice. And there we go, we've got a nice solid strike. We'll do one more. And it's just started raining. It's not rained all morning. Come out, and then there we go. And pull that low. But that's because my hand was bouncing up and down. Shooting paper, writing down your data and learning what you're doing and what the gun is doing in certain conditions is how you improve. But don't shoot everything just low to the ground. And for the next piece, we need a bit of equipment. Now, as you can see, now we have a nice large ladder with a target right at the top. That's about a 10-foot ladder. Now, obviously, when you're shooting up a ladder, you need to think about a backstop. You need to think where the pellet's going to go. That box that we've got there is full of dirt and bricks, so the pellet isn't going to go through. But certainly, if you're shooting elevated things, think about that upward trajectory, and if you miss where the pellet's going to land, we've got plenty of land behind us and there's a tree directly behind where I'm aiming. So if for any reason it did get through, it's still not an issue. But now we're going to practice shooting our elevated target like you'd often find a 15mm on a course up a tree. Okay, it is actually starting to properly rain now, which is irritating. We've got pellets in. And this is very reminiscent of a target you would actually get in HFT. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 line down on the left. Okay, I'm happy with that. We're going for the same hole, or same target. Well, one's slightly to the right and one's slightly to the left. So now let's try one up the peg. Well, that would have been a physical miss outside of the 15mm target. So again, let's try that same target again, but this time I'm going to allow for the fact that when I'm coming up the peg, my pellets seem to be hitting low. Well, obviously I didn't allow enough. Let's try again. Same target. And fractionally at the top. So we're learning information. Up the peg, out the shoulder. That's something I really need to start practicing, because those levels of groups are just not acceptable. But it's now starting to rain really quite hard, so I think I'm going to go in and save the cameras. Here we are at Malden District, and we're on the open meadow course. Now the open meadow course is absolutely perfect to practice in because we get a fairly constant wind. From here we've got a wind coming from my left hand side from your right, and it's going across at around about 10 miles per hour. So how can we train while we're here? Well, the first thing we can do is we can pick up the string. Now I don't really know if you can make that out, but you can see that the string is starting to bow right to left. Now, if you can imagine that on a clock face, and with 6 o'clock at the bottom, it's not even hitting 7 o'clock. So what we do is we get down on the peg and we shoot that target at 40 yards. And we know that it's moving roughly at 7 o'clock. And how much does it move? Well, it might move half a mil dot. It might move nothing, depending on your gun and how you shoot. So I now know in future that if I hold a string on an elevated target and it's moving between 5 o'clock and 7 o'clock, I know that I remain within the kill. If, however, it's moving and it's bending and it's pointing at 9 o'clock, so I'll need to come down on another day when it's windier, and again I train and I practice, and I now know that it's moving maybe a mil dot and a half. And I'm writing all this information down. Every time you take a shot like that, write it down. It's moving. The string is bending at 7 o'clock. It moved a quarter of a mil dot. It's moving absolutely perpendicular. It's blowing out at the side. It moved 2 mil dots. I pulled the string tight. I let go of the string and the wind ripped it through my fingers. It's moving 4 mil dots. Think about what you do, write it down and keep notes. The other thing, that a good thing to train, as you can see, look, it's actually starting to bend quite a lot now. So the wind has picked up. But if we look at the string now low to the ground, the one that's high up is moving. It's almost being pulled through my fingers, whereas the one low to the ground is not being blown anywhere near as much. And that's a thing to remember. If we look to our right, if we look over there in the distance, you can see that up high, you've got plenty of room for the wind to pick up speed, but along the ground, you've got all that baffling, all of that flora and fauna, which is helping to kill the speed of the wind. So this is another thing to think about when you are practicing and when you are training. Just because you can hear the wind blowing the trees hard up in the air does not mean that it's blowing it along the ground. So that's one of our training techniques. Get yourself down on the peg, shoot a target, make a note of what the string is doing, make a note of what the leaves are doing, and then that way you can review it later on and you can start building knowledge and building charts so that you know what you want to do. So that's sort of shooting in the wind and a little training technique that will help you improve. Now, as we've all seen many times in the past, I'm lucky to have my own range at home, and I can put targets out wherever I need, out to 50, 60, 70 yards. But part of the advantage with being a member of a club is you have the plinking range, 10 yards, 25 yards, all the way out to 70 yards. And a lot of clubs will have these, the ability to put out paper targets. If you shoot the metal, it's all well and good, but metal flakes off. Paper really shows you the accuracy of your rifle. If you're punching single hole groups, you know that the gun is working well. But when you're setting up your rifle, it's so important to learn exactly where your aim points are. Not roughly, not shooting, oh, I can knock down that 40 yard 30mm target time after time. That's great, but it's a 30mm target. You could be missing by 30mm, because if you go in high, it's going to fall over. If you're going low, it's going to fall over, and you're going to miss by that. If you're shooting paper, if you put a mark on the paper and you're dropping that much low, you know that you've got to adjust your rifle. So set out paper. If your club doesn't have these sort of targets, speak to your club official and say, can I set out some paper targets? A great time to also come and shoot is either at dawn or dusk, if your club allows 24-hour access. Here at Malden, we do dawn to dusk membership. And a lot of competitive shooters get here just as the sun is coming up, because at that point the sun has not heated the air and you get often the stillest conditions. Now, shooting in still conditions is absolutely great when you're setting up your rifle, but when you go to a competition, it's not going to be still. So you need to come to the club when the weather is bad. You need to come when it's raining. You need to come when it's cold. You need to come when it's hot. Spring guns, when they're cold, run faster. When they're hot, they run slower because the seals swell. PCPs, it's the other way around. PCPs, when they get hot, they go faster. When they get cold, they go slower. So you need to know what your gun does in different conditions. As we spoke about earlier on, have a piece of string to actually, use the piece of string to the target to gauge. But also when you're on the plinking range, if you've got a left to right wind, pick up some grass and drop it. Now, even though it doesn't feel like there's any wind here at the moment, you can see that grass landed just a foot to my left. That means there's around about a 3 mile/hour wind. If I drop it now and it lands 6 feet to my left, I know it's a 6 or 7 miles/hour wind. There are people out there who have a set amount of grass that they drop, and they know by how far it falls how fast the wind is. Do you ever have one of those days? It's been tipping it down and I need to get this bit of footage done. Just stopped raining, well, still spitting, came out here and the farmer decides this very second to start cutting all the hedges right outside my house. A really important training tool, and this was something that was taught to me a while back, is if you are really rubbish at supported shots, and they're kneelers or standers, don't start off with a 35mm kill at 35 yards. We've got a 35mm paper target out there, 35 yards away, and let's see how we get on. Okay, not too bad, we were within the kill. It's always the way. And let's try another. Oh, massively out to the right. One more. Oh, good, Bennett. I really need to work on my standards. So bring the target in. Bring the target in to 20 yards. Why did I cock that? Right, I'm going to go and move the target. I'm going to bring it in 20 yards. So I'm going to bring it in 20 yards. and then we're going to practice with a 35mm at 20 yards. Give me a sec. Okay, so we've now brought the target into 20 yards. Makes it considerably easier. So 3 shots on that. Well, within the kill zone. Well, let me try putting the microphone up here. Do apologise if it's going all crackly. Remember to touch the peg. Okay. Alignment, alignment, alignment. Oh, pulled that one out to the left. Maybe I need to bring it in at 10 yards. I'm really struggling with my standards at the moment. And that one was just below. But considerably better group than when we were actually shooting at 35 yards because it's closer. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a bit tired. Excuse. Do this with kneelers, do this with standards. Bring it in close and close and close until you can get everything consistently within that 35mm kill. And if you've got to start off at 10 yards, start off at 10 yards. Then move out to 12 to 15 to 20. Gradually build your ability. Don't start off with a Formula 1 car. Don't start off with a 35mm at 35 yards. Start off short. And then when you can kill it every time, move out and move out and move out. And then once you start getting to 20, 25 yards, start maybe shooting a target. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to build that connection between your optic nerve, your brain and your trigger finger. Now I'm suffering with a thing at the moment that in golf we call the yips. I will hold the crosshairs in the kill zone and my brain is screaming, pull the trigger, pull the trigger, pull the trigger, and my finger won't. And only when I seem to pull out the kill zone do I pull the trigger. It is as frustrating as anything. And I've actually recently spoken to a sports psychologist about trying to get beyond this. You know, it is clearly a mental problem. I want to do well, and I'm getting angry with myself because I don't. And that's causing anxiety and making me not want to pull the trigger, making me miss shots. And this is actually training that I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks before the World Championships. I'm bringing that target into 15 yards. And for the first 2 or 3 days, that's all I'm going to shoot, 15 yards. Then 20, then 25. And do you know what? I'm probably not going to go much beyond 25 yards because I want to rebuild that neural pathway between the optic nerve, the brain, and the trigger finger. And by shooting something a long way away where I'm missing all the time, it's not building confidence. 20 yards, let's just switch the brain off. Not worry about where it's going to go. When I'm in the kill, I'm going to pull the trigger. Okay, alignment. Okay, alignment. Well, I think that went in. And the last one. Well, it looks like we got 2 in the kill and 1 slightly low, considerably better than I've been doing recently. So switch that brain off and just be reactive. Now, Our other bit of training is something that I need to apologise for. In the past, I've told you many times that I am much better at standers than I am kneelers, certainly when it comes to supported shots. So let's talk about standers first of all. We often will find a tree to practice on. I've got trees at home that I practice on all the time, and I'm absolutely great shooting from those trees at home. But often you'll get a peg, you know, something like this, a post that's different to a tree. So instead of shooting on your tree like that, I'm now having to rest on top of the post. It's a very different shot to shooting from a tree. Now, the other thing I said, and this is what I got wrong, so I apologise, is if you're better at one particular shot, practice that. That's wrong. Many times recently, I've had to shoot a target, and I'm still much better at standers than I am kneelers. But the shot from kneeling position is considerably easier than from the standing position. But because I've not been practicing it, my skill set has dropped. So, for some reason I can't find my cushion. So, practice your standers. 100%. Practice your kneelers. Practice off the left side of the peg. Practice off the right side of the peg. And practice your reverse kneelers. And a reverse kneeler is where you're placing your elbow on the back of your leg, and you get a much more stable position. Essentially, practice everything. Now here we have a perfect example of a tree that course setters like to use for supported shots. Down here low, it's nice and straight, so that if you take a kneeling position, you don't need to worry and you've got a nice stable position. But up here, you're now having to lean with the tree. You're not getting that good grip that you usually have. You can come off this side of the tree, but now you're using the back of your hand and gripping the rifle. Something like this is absolutely perfect to practice on. Find yourself a bent tree and just practice. Put a target out, get permission to put a target out, and just shoot. See if you can find a tree that bends in the other direction. See if you can find a thick tree or a thin tree. I mean, looking around here, most of our trees are very similar, because I can put my hand quite well round that tree and get a good grip. But if I've got a big massive tree, like I tell you what, this one over here, look at this large tree here. I'm no longer gripping the tree, I'm just leaning against it and I'm trying to get a solid position. It might be a case that it's hard to see the target from there. So now I'm having to come over here and trying to get a solid position. So find every different type of tree you can and shoot from all sides, up, down, you know, left and right. The more you practice on the different types of trees that you can find, the better you will become. Go and buy a forest. The other issue that we sometimes have when people are training as opposed to practicing is they will come into a plinking hut like this. Again, we're here at Malden District in this smaller plinking hut, and this bench, absolutely brilliant. We get lots of people who come in here and shoot, and they just spend all day chatting. Big comfy chair, big comfy cushion, cup of tea, bacon sandwich, everybody's happy. But when you're shooting from the bench, and you might have a cushion, and you're shooting from the bench, if you look, my head is very upright. But if I'm now laying down at a peg, do you notice the bend in my neck is different? I'm now looking up through the top part of my eye, through the scope. And as I move my head back, I'm now looking from the optic nerve at the back straight through. I'm looking through a different part of my eye. If I zeroed my rifle from this bench and I then shot prone, I would have a completely different aim point. It would hit around about 1/2 mil dot low for me. I know, I've tried. So if you're going to shoot prone, train prone. If you're going to shoot from a bench, train from a bench. No matter what you're training, you need to train in the position that you are going to shoot from, or predominantly going to shoot. Just a little aside, I was just about to leave and I noticed this in the bin, so there's got clearly someone here who's actually practicing. Now this is a nice empty page. It was in the bin, so I'm going to take it home and I'm going to use it. But you can see you've got something like a 15mm hole with a dot in the middle. You put it out at 25 yards and you're able to obliterate that dot every single time. Then get yourself on a tree. So do those lines prone. Then get yourself on a tree. Shoot the next 2 lines. Then get yourself kneeling. Next 2 lines. And you know, prone, standing, kneeling, prone, kneeling. Stick this in a photocopier. Make loads and loads of copies of it. And then keep them. Put a date on it, put a time on it. And then you can watch over the years as your groups improve. You might notice that all of your standers are absolutely solid, but all of your kneelers are absolutely miles away. You now need to know where to focus your training, but do not give up doing these for these. And the other thing we need to talk about is cost. If you want to get good at HFT, cost is an implication. And I'm not talking about your gun and your scope. I'm talking about time and pellets. I get through, at the moment, I'm training for the HFT World Championships, and I'm getting through a tin of pellets every 2 to 3 days. Pellets have got expensive. You know, you're talking 15, 20 pounds a tin now. But a season ticket to the football is £1,000 a year. Snooker is £20 an hour. Cinema, God, if you want popcorn, you'll be bankrupt. If this is your sport, invest in yourself. Invest in your pellets. Get the right pellets, get plenty of pellets, and get out there and practice. I'm aware that things are tough these days, but there is no substitute for trigger time. And just getting out there and just sending lead down range, but sending it down focused with a plan will certainly help you improve. Don't just shoot willy-nilly. Have a plan, stick to the plan, and every time you get out there, try and learn a little bit more. You might not get better, you might not get worse, but every time you shoot, you will learn a little bit more. And then one day, somehow, everything will click and you'll be out there and you'll be winning. So, get the right gun, get the right scope, get your pellets, get your printer fired up and get out there and train. Things like this are an absolutely amazing guide and amazing help to shooting. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I hope that you'll be able to take some of what we've spoken about today away with you, and it will help you train to become a better shooter. I'm bringing in all of these steps that I'm currently talking about. I've got 3 weeks until the HFT World Championships. There are some brilliant spring gun shooters out there. Michael Kodabelski is been shooting amazingly all year. So has Rex, he's started to step it up. So has Piotr, so has Jonathan Peter Franklin. There are loads of shooters out there, you know, Perry Broad and loads of other people. They're going to be hard to beat. But with the correct training and the correct practice, I know that I'm capable of doing my best. So, guys, I'm coming for you, and hopefully the Gary will rise again. Not that I was ever that great, to be honest, but I plan to rise again. A bit like the South. That can be a little bit dodgy. Take care of yourselves, look after each other, and we'll see you all again on the range very, very soon. Ta-da!